Publication in Nature. According to Science, another academic journal being published in Nature has been known to carry a certain level of prestige in academia. In particular, empirical papers are often highly cited, which can lead to promotions, grant funding, and attention from the mainstream media. Because of these positive feedbacks affects competition among scientists to publish in high-level journals like Nature, and its closest competitor, Science, can be very fierce. Nature's impact factor, a measure of how many citations a journal generates in other works, was 38,138 in 2015, as measured by Thomson ISI. However, as with many journals, most papers receive far fewer citations than the impact factor would indicate. Nature's journal impact factor carries a long tail. As with most other professional scientific journals, papers undergo an initial screening by the editor, followed by peer review, in which other scientists chosen by the editor for expertise with the subject matter but who have no connection to the research under review will read and critique articles before publication. In the case of Nature, they are only sent for a review if it is decided that they deal with a topical subject and are sufficiently groundbreaking in that particular field. As a consequence, the majority of submitted papers are rejected without review. According to Nature's original mission statement, it is intended first to place before the general public the grand results of scientific work and scientific discovery, and to urge the claims of science to a more general recognition in education and in daily life, and secondly, to aid scientific men themselves by giving early information of all advances made in any branch of natural knowledge throughout the world, and by affording them an opportunity of discussing the various scientific questions which arise from time to time. This was later revised to first to serve scientists through prompt publication of significant advances in any branch of science, and to provide a forum for the reporting and discussion of news and issues concerning science. Second, to ensure that the results of science are rapidly disseminated to the public throughout the world in a fashion that conveys their significance for knowledge, culture, and daily life. Landmark papers. Many of the most significant scientific breakthroughs in modern history have been first published in Nature. The following is a selection of scientific breakthroughs published in Nature, all of which had far reaching consequences, and the citation for the article in which they were published. Wave nature of particles, the neutron, nuclear fission, the structure of DNA, first molecular protein structure, myoglobin, plate tectonics, pulsars, the ozone hole, first cloning of a mammal, the human genome, controversies. In 2017, Nature published an editorial entitled Removing Statues of Historical Figures Risk Whitewashing History. Science must acknowledge mistakes as it marks its past. The article commented on the placement and maintenance of statues honoring scientists with known unethical, abusive, and torturous histories. Specifically, the editorial called on examples of J. Marion Sims, the father of gynecology, who experimented on African American female slaves who were unable to give informed consent, and Thomas Parran Jr., who oversaw the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. The editorial is written made the case that removing such statues and erasing names runs the risk of whitewashing history, and stated instead of removing painful reminders, perhaps these should be supplemented. The article caused a large outcry and was quickly modified by Nature. The article was largely seen as offensive, inappropriate, and by many racist. Nature acknowledged that the article as originally written was offensive and poorly worded, and published selected letters of response. The editorial came just weeks after hundreds of white supremacists marched in Charlottesville, Virginia, in the Unite the Right rally to oppose the removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee. setting off violence in the streets and killing a young woman. When Nature posted a link to the editorial on Twitter, the thread quickly exploded with criticisms. In response, several scientists called for a boycott on 18 September 2017. The editorial was updated and edited by Philip Campbell, the editor of the journal. When Paul Lauterbur and Peter Mansfield won a Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for research initially rejected by Nature and published only after Lauterbur appealed against the rejection, Nature acknowledged more of its own missteps in rejecting papers in an editorial titled Coping with Peer Rejection. There are unarguable faux pas in our history. These include the rejection of Cherenkov radiation, Hideki Yukawa's meson, work on photosynthesis by Johann Deisenhofer, Robert Huber and Hartmut Michel, and the initial rejection but eventual acceptance of Stephen Hawking's black hole radiation. In June 1988, after nearly a year of guided scrutiny from its editors, Nature published a controversial and seemingly anomalous paper detailing Jacques Benveniste and his team's work studying human basophil degranulation in the presence of extremely dilute antibody serum. The paper concluded that less than a single molecule of antibody could trigger an immune response in human basophils, defying the physical law of mass action. The paper excited substantial media attention in Paris, chiefly because their research sought finding from homeopathic medicine companies. Public inquiry prompted Nature to mandate an extensive and stringent experimental replication in Benveniste's lab, through which his team's results were refuted. Before publishing one of its most famous discoveries, Watson and Crick's 1953 paper on the structure of DNA, Nature did not send the paper out for peer review. John Maddox, Nature's editor, stated that the Watson and Crick paper was not peer reviewed by Nature. The paper could not have been referred. Its correctness is self-evident. No referee working in the field could have kept his mouth shut once he saw the structure. An earlier error occurred when Enrico Fermi submitted his breakthrough paper on the weak interaction theory of beta decay. Nature rejected the paper because it was considered too remote from reality. Fermi's paper was published by Zeitschrift für Physik in 1934. The journal apologized for its initial coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic, in which it linked China and Wuhan with the outbreak, which may have led to racist attacks. Retractions. A paper was published with important figure anomalies from an author with a bachelor of publishing figure anomalies. The 2013 fraudulent paper was also published in Nature. From 2000 to 2001, a series of five fraudulent papers by Jan Hendrik Schon was published in Nature. The papers about semiconductors were revealed to contain falsified data and other scientific fraud. In 2003, Nature retracted the papers. The Schon scandal was not limited to Nature. Other prominent journals, such as Science and Physical Review, also retracted papers by Schon. Science fiction. In 1999, Nature began publishing science fiction short stories. The brief vignettes are printed in a series called Futures. The stories appeared in 1999 and 2000, again in 2005 and 2006, and have appeared weekly since July 2007. Sister publication Nature Physics also printed stories in 2007 and 2008. In 2005, Nature was awarded the European Science Fiction Society's Best Publisher Award for the Future series. 100 of the Nature stories between 1999 and 2006 were published as the collection Futures from Nature in 2008. Another collection, Futures from Nature, was published in 2014. Publication Nature is edited and published in the United Kingdom by a division of the international scientific publishing company Springer Nature that publishes academic journals, magazines, online databases, and services in science and medicine. Nature has offices in London, New York City, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Boston, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Paris, Munich, and Basingstoke. Nature Research also publishes other specialized journals, including Nature Neuroscience, Nature Biotechnology, Nature Methods, the Nature Clinical Practice series of journals, Nature Structural and Molecular Biology, Nature Chemistry, and the Nature Reviews series of journals. Since 2005, each issue of Nature has been accompanied by a Nature podcast, featuring highlights from the issue and interviews with the article's authors and the journalists covering the research. It is presented by Kerry Smith and features interviews with scientists on the latest research, as well as news reports from Nature's editors and journalists. The Nature's podcast was founded, and the first 100 episodes were produced and presented by clinician and virologist Chris Smith of Cambridge and the Naked Scientists. In 2007, Nature Publishing Group began publishing Clinical Pharmacology and Therapeutics, the official journal of the American Society of Clinical Pharmacology and Therapeutics, and Molecular Therapy, the American Society of Gene Therapy's official journal, as well as the International Society for Microbial Ecology (ISME) journal. Nature Publishing Group launched Nature Photonics in 2007 and Nature Geoscience in 2008. Nature Chemistry published its first issue in April 2009. Nature Research actively supports the self archiving process and in 2002 was one of the first publishers to allow authors to post their contributions on their personal websites by requesting an exclusive license to publish rather than requiring authors to transfer copyright. In December 2007, Nature Publishing Group introduced the Creative Commons Attribution Non Commercial Share Alike Unported license for those articles in Nature journals that are publishing the primary sequence of an organism's genome for the first time. In 2008, a collection of articles from Nature was edited by John S. Partington under the title H. G. Wells in Nature, 1893 to 1946, a reception reader, and published by Peter Lang. After a 2015 merger, Nature Publishing Group dissolved and was afterwards known as Nature Research.